Excellent. I believe we are live. Welcome everyone to the Bright Talks session centered around navigating the challenges of driving and scaling AI adoption. I'm Dan Fitzpatrick with Dell Technologies Capital, which is the venture capital arm of Dell Technologies. Thanks very much for joining us today and for your time. We're pleased to speak with you today because we believe the conversation is certainly timely and also an important one. With the acceleration of organizations' digital transformation efforts and initiatives over the past several years, and where artificial intelligence really plays a critical role in those efforts, and the AI market has really grown tremendously. However, as we know, even though companies realize the value of AI and its potential, rollouts have been slow, and most companies have really struggled to both successfully deploy and also scale AI across their enterprises. So during today's conversation, we plan to address why adopting AI is so challenging, and also what organizations can do to drive real business value and also scale adoption successfully. So we're delighted to have an expert panel here with us today. We're very well equipped to share some helpful insights and perspectives on the topic. We're joined by Zohar Bronfman, the CEO and co-founder of Pecan AI, the AI-powered predictive analytics platform. Welcome, Zohar. We're joined by Niranjan Ramsunder, the CTO of UST, the global digital transformation solution provider. Welcome, Niranjan. We're joined by Tom Dickey, Director of North America Consumer Inventory and End-to-End Supply Chain Analytics at Johnson & Johnson. Welcome, Tom. And we're joined by Saeed Tabet, Chief Architect and Distinguished Engineer with Dell Technologies. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we have a lot of great insight to cover in the discussion, so let's dive in. In terms of format, we're going to hear from each panel member, starting with a bit more context around their role in their organization, and then into their respective firms' point of view on AI and how it fits into the digital journey and their overall strategies, and then current trends each is seeing, associated opportunities, business challenges with AI. Each participant will have roughly 10 to 15 minutes each to share their journey, but we hope that the conversation flows organically. And of course, we'll open it up for discussion and Q&A at the end. If you do have a question that you'd love to submit over chat, feel free to do so. I'll be keeping an eye on it. And if it's really compelling, we'll break in. But we will have time reserved at the end of the conversation. Just a reminder, the conversation is also being recorded for learning purposes. So just keep that in mind. So Tom, we'll start first with you. We'll pick on you.
Sure.
And to hear more about the Johnson & Johnson journey. J&J is a large multinational enterprise member of the Fortune 50, one of the world's most well-regarded brands and companies with a long track record of history and innovation. AI has also been a focus area and plays a significant role in your firm digital strategy. Walk us through the journey, and if you could share, what you can about how J&J is applying AI across the enterprise and what some of those challenges have been.
Sure. Thank you so much. Excited to be here today. So I can speak to the perspective of our consumer health division where I work. So I lead, in addition to inventory and analytics, I lead our digital strategy, which in our supply chain, which we're shaping collaboratively with our commercial, our R&D, and our quality organizations. So our real guiding principle is, we established our digital North Star, and for us, that means we want to live digital first. We want to challenge convention and deliver end-to-end experiences that shape the future of consumer health. One thing to remember, we realized very quickly, like J&J, we're not a digital company. We're not Amazon. We're a healthcare company. So our digital strategy and how we're adopting AI really fits our model, what we want to be in as a leading healthcare company. So how we want to achieve our digital first mindset, we've kind of bucketed into four pillars. First, we want to build consumer and healthcare professional preference and loyalty through an ecosystem of integrated cross-channel experiences. Second, we want to predict and meet evolving consumer preferences to deliver science-based innovation faster and more effectively. Third, we want to drive shared value with customers using AI and automation to continuously optimize performance. And fourth, we want to empower our teams with new digital capabilities and technology to unlock the full potential of our organization. Our foundational layer of how we'll accomplish it, obviously, it's fueled by the data which being a consumer health company, we've got a robust, Zohar knows well, we've got a robust library of data. It's a matter of how to unlock it and use it to drive value. We want to simplify our efforts through technology, and ultimately our efforts are not successful if they're not driven by the people in our organization.
Excellent, and thanks, Tom.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate it. And Zohar, we'll go next to you. Pecan AI is obviously a growing leader in the predictive analytics in the AI space. And given you've worked closely with Tom and his team at J&J, it'd be great to hear how Pecan is looking at all this. And what should companies be thinking about in terms of more efficiently extracting value from AI? If you wouldn't also mind giving attendees a sense of who Pecan AI is and how you work with customers like J&J as well.
Sure, thanks, Dan. So quickly about Pecan in a couple of sentences. Pecan is a predictive analytics platform, and our specialization is not only around machine learning and AI algorithms, but also, and very importantly, around the data handling and data preparation that precedes the machine learning and AI, which is so important to make the outputs eventually valid, valuable, and to prevent the cases where AI eventually end up unfortunately failing. And we will get to that maybe later on. So we took as a mission not only specializing in the predictive algorithms, but also in the way that we address the data challenges that happen before you can apply the AI algorithms. And building on what Tom just said, J&J has an amazing sources of data, and being able to incorporate those and build the processes that you have to have in place so that the AI algorithms eventually end up making a difference is our point of departure from the technological perspective. So when we work with our partners on AI adoption or AI augmentation or AI acceleration, obviously, we focus much of the efforts on that aspect, the data preparation and handling as well.
That's excellent. I'm sorry, please.
Yeah, no, I think that maybe I can double click for a couple of minutes on what it means to do the data preparation in advance, just briefly now, and we can expand later. Everyone always say garbage in, garbage out when they talk about AI, and there's a good reason for why they do so. The actual predictive or AI algorithms eventually are sophisticated, non-trivial, but yet still statistical models. And the statistical models are by definition confined to the data that they analyze. If you want to bear any fruit from your AI efforts, the data has to be in a place where it tells the right story, both from the technological or the technical aspect, which means that the data has to be complete, has to be cleansed. You have to find a way to combat the standard illnesses that the data possesses. Think of duplicates, things like missing values. These are all stuff that the statistical algorithms themselves are actually blind to, and can make them be very erroneous and actually mislead you with their outputs. So the data has to be technically handled, but then also the data has to be constructed correctly from the business perspective. The data tells a story. And if you are only doing the technical aspects of the data handling and you don't incorporate the business knowledge into the way you shape the data, you won't be able to capture in many times the whole benefits that can come out of the AI algorithm. And I can talk more about the kind of challenges we see with data later on.
That's excellent. And see you nodding, Saeed. I know we talked about this the other day about the quality of data and have kind of the guardrails around the algorithms. Would you like to elaborate? Is there something you wanted to add on to that point?
Absolutely, Dan. I mean, we talked about that, and with Zohar as well. It is a topic that's been out there. Obviously, when we talk about data, both Tom and Zohar mentioned that when we think about data management or data frameworks and governance in general, or all these kind of initiatives, in a way, AI needs that data management. Data management needs the data. To Zohar's point, that's where we go into some of these areas. We talked about the concept of drifting in AI systems. Obviously, yeah, I mean, as well illustrated, garbage in, garbage out. In a way, systems, if we're trying to get them to reason, to generate insights, the data sets are very important. The way they're prepared, tagged, and semantically made ready to be consumed by training algorithms, by even in the inferencing and the testing as well, the approach you're taking. Because often you'll see organizations capturing data from a lot of different sources. Some of it is public data they would use for training without the depth of looking into that, just as Tom was talking about, unlocking this library, this richness in that data. It's very important to do that. So that's one of the biggest issues at the moment around the adoption, and we'll probably come back to that later as well, Dan, in terms of deploying these systems in the real world. And you'll see, I mean, the quality, often you'll see broken sensors or sources of data, natural phenomena. Sometimes you were talking earlier about weather, right? You capture data in my environment or in Zohar's environment or in Niranjan's environment. There will be different ways to interpret that, and potentially those systems didn't include that type of context in the training, and you'll see those issues, and we need to be able to be aware of it and be able to actually remediate and have solutions for that. Yeah.
That's excellent. And Niranjan, as UST global provider of digital technology solutions in a company that works with a variety of sizes of companies, global enterprises, SMB, smaller companies. It'd be great to get your perspective on this, and then also more broadly trends that you're seeing at scale, and what some of those challenges could be associated with deployments or just around data management. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more about what you've seen in your experience.
Yeah, I mean, data management has been brought up, by Syed as well as from Zohar. That's definitely an area of concern, because it takes 50-60% of the effort of any effort around AI. It goes into these kind of surrounding activities rather than building the core models. That aside, I think the biggest challenge we have in terms of adoption of AI at scale has been confidence in the results that come out of those AI models. Now, it could be because of data quality, it could be because of the models themselves not being very transparent as you get more and more into deep learning models. So there is an element of explainability that is needed, particularly when you come to practitioners. So we found an interesting project in Israel where the hospitals, the doctors saying, okay, the data makes sense, but I can't use it till I have my own guidance and my own certificate boards which recommend a particular course of action for a particular treatment. And I cannot jump just because some data model told me something. Can you prove it to me or show it to me in a way which I can understand that what are the key considerations, what are the key features which I've extracted, which makes sense to me from a medical point of view. So the translation between AI and something that can be practically understood by the practitioners at a SME or a subject matter level, that I think is one of the factors which stop adoption. The second has been, of course, the sheer governance of this, and this is something that Saeed also brought up, that governance of how do you ensure that the models are not drifted? How do you know that the decision you took with a particular data at a particular time is still valid? How do you know that you're not created bias which is unknown and unplanned for in your decisions? So those kind of questions are also concerning now as AI gets into more of core decisions of an organization. So that's where we are finding most of our challenges and opportunities, to be honest, in terms of looking at why should we use AI, why does it significantly change the way your business is operating or it disrupts the competition. or your own business, and then how do you really make it useful so that people are willing to use it? That's where we are spending most of our effort. So I'll stop here. Any questions or any thoughts as this comes up more. But I think adoption has multiple angles in which you can attack, and these are some of them.
That's excellent, and thank you very much. Tom, to take the kind of the enterprise angle from J&J, we've seen some stats. I was reading a report that was shared by Saeed recently about the last few years. AI is obviously more mainstream and a core priority for most companies in terms of adoption. To pile on, most efforts fail. I think it was either Gartner or IDC or both say there's like a 50% failure rate on AI projects. That's significant. So how does are there stories that can be shared? How does J&J navigate that in terms of driving adoption from an enterprise perspective? And then what's your perspective on why most projects do fail?
I don't look at it as failure either. Like for us, we've made a significant investment in this space, and we've resourced a team centrally in the organization that leads our data sciences. And we don't really look at it as failure if we're learning from it, right? So we are willing to do a lot of POCs and work with companies like Pecan and our own internal development teams. Again, because we're trying to drive forward, and again, we're not a digital company, so we know which lanes we play in and which ones we don't. But again, I think there's a spirit of even a company our size and with our history. There's a spirit of entrepreneurialness and startup mentality that we're willing to experiment and try, because we know that that's what's going to give us a competitive edge. So again, we don't look at it as failure. We think it's that willingness to try, test, and learn. There's a real spirit of that in the company, and all the way up to our leadership, they encourage it, and they're really you could see it in the investments they've made in building out our capabilities here.
That's excellent. Thanks, Tom. Zohar, back to you. To continue with the adoption focus. What are other things companies should be thinking about based on some of your experiences driving AI adoption? Is there anything that we haven't addressed that you think would be useful to know?
Yes, of course. I think we touched upon several challenges, but we might want to drill down to some of them in more detail. I think that the first way that I segment the challenges would be technical challenges versus more business-oriented challenges. It helps me to think about it, and I think once you do that, the solution is usually also different. There are different ways of solving, obviously, technical challenges and business-related challenges. So within the technical challenges, like we said, it's, of course, the data challenges. And within the data, Saeed spoke about drift. There's also related concept of leakage, which is something under-discussed. But this is something that many data scientists pull many hairs around. Leakage basically means that within your training data, within the data upon which you build the models, you actually accidentally include data coming, quote unquote, from the future, from data that you won't have once the models run live. So let me give you a very simple example just to illustrate the concept. It's a bit in the minutia, but I think it helps portraying how hard it is to build proper models. So let's say that we want to build a relatively simple model that predicts customer churn. And let's say that in my data set, there's a column that's being updated after the customer has churned in retrospect to include a binary kind of flag, whether this customer been approached by a retention rep or not. If I accidentally include this column in the training data set, the model will see an amazing correlation between cases that eventually churn and this column of the sales rep being in touch with the customer. But in reality, when the next customer will come in the future, I won't have this data point in my data, obviously, because the sales rep hasn't talked to the customer yet. So this is a classic, again, technical difficulty that explains how well the person that is owning the model and is building the data for the model, how well they need to understand not only the technical aspects of the data, but also the business flow and how the data represents the business flow. So I think this is an example, and you know, it's so annoying, because what happens is actually you see an amazing model. You are sitting and watching the model performance, and because there's this leakage, you see 95% accuracy. The model is doing very well. You're very happy. You are running to production. Then you face all the challenges with going to production that we'll talk about. The model starts running, and obviously it's completely erroneous. It's completely flawed. So I would say it's just one example for so many cases that only the combination of the tools and the business domain knowledge can together overcome. And you know, put yourself in the shoes of quote unquote the executive. You know, they set on a mission. They said, I want to adopt AI at the moment. Let's use this tool for churn prediction. They wait for a couple of months. They hear the model is doing an amazing work. They are excited. Finally, I'm going to see some results around the use case. Then the model is deployed into production. And then you come back and say, listen, the model is completely erroneous. It would have been better just to guess. It's very frustrating. And then AI loses credibility. So one thing that you see now in the market, at least from my experience, there are many cases where people are saying, listen, we tried already adopting AI. You said, you talked about the 50% likelihood of an initiative to fail. I've tried it. It took so much time. It took so much resources. And it ended up being worse than the rule we have today. I don't want to take another adventure on myself. And then it's a loop that makes the business challenges come again, and so on and so forth. So again, a small example, a bit technical, but can tell the story of a failure, so to speak.
That's excellent, and I appreciate it. And you know, switching gears a little bit, but I know talent has come up quite a bit. And you know, what are the right skill sets? How do you enable the skill sets? You know, for implementing AI successfully, and how should organizations think about this? You know, is it about upskilling and enablement? Do you hire and build out a data science team, or do you rely on solution providers, the tech companies, to provide the skill sets through their support services and leveraging the outsourced capabilities? So it'd be great to get your perspective on kind of that talent focus.
Yeah. Absolutely, Dan. But if you don't mind, I want to add a point to what Zohar was saying.
Absolutely.
In fact, actually, these are definitely serious issues. Both the technical and the business side are not separated, in a sense that, to Zohar's point, we have to look at these hybrid solutions or hybrid approaches and strategies in AI that are now coming up, so that they can actually deal with these gaps from that perspective. For example, you would have the domain expertise integrated from day one. I think to the point that Tom was making earlier, that culture of AI is important initially for the success of these projects. We are starting to see more and more of that. From that credibility point of view, I mean, you'll hear quite a lot from the academics now walking back some of the earlier assumptions from about 4 or 5 years ago, talking about trustworthy AI or trust in AI systems. And that's going to be very important, explainability and so on. Where we try to deal with the drift, with the leakage, and with a few other type of quality issues in terms of the kind of outcomes that are coming out of these systems, particularly in mission-critical environments. So I think that that's really important that Zohar brought that up, that we need, and our audience also, to think about this more and more and to include that. And I'm really glad that Tom brought up that point earlier. Now, in terms of talent, and that goes into that point as well, right? From a talent point of view, I mean, we've known for years now that there is a huge gap. There's just not enough talented and enough expertise, and particularly on the educational side, there's efforts, but it's important to find the right balance in terms of hiring these talents, in terms of integrating them into the teams, the business sides, the goals, the objectives, the technical aspects, the data science elements, which kind of interestingly, Dan, these days they're actually driving some of that data management strategy within those organizations, and which is a good thing. But you need to have that multidisciplinary team brought together. I'm sure Niranjan could speak to that as well, and particularly as we engage more and more post-COVID in accelerated digital transformation activities across literally all kinds of sectors. Yeah, thanks.
Excellent, thank you. And Niranjan, perfect cue if you wanted to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things quickly before Tom might have some more practical experience of doing this in his organization. But we found two things. One, a small team of people who are not just AI-driven but are cross-functional. We call them an innovation pod. It's a very powerful way of getting insights early into the leakages that Zohar mentioned, or into the design of the whole experiment to make sure that it scales. So we might have somebody with, for example, IT security background. We might have somebody with data governance background, privacy and data governance. You could have somebody with the domain knowledge of that particular business, and then you have an AI expert. So they come together for a short period, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, do something practical, show something which is useful, and then you prove value of what you're doing. So that's one way that we are attacking that problem. The other aspect of it, a bit different from what this is if you have, for example, IoT devices, and you want to capture data from that for driving a problem and a solution. The challenge is not that solution as much as what happens to the IoT devices. How do I get it back? How do I use it again? How expensive is it to roll it out and then not find it again? For example, container tracking or anything in a workshop. So we found that those are physical, commercial challenges in terms of making things work. And one solution we found, which is at scale for a manufacturing company, was using video analytics. The same thing that could be done with an IoT device on manufacturing, machines and items going through the pipe, going through the entire flow. You could replace it with videos and get video feeds and use that to then identify productivity of employees, find out quality issues with items. We are even able to look at lemons and say whether lemons are good quality or not. So very interesting solutions now because of the problems and constraints you have in terms of the data acquisition and the cost of doing it, which are now getting to be the cutting edge of where real AI is being scaled. So that's really where we are finding opportunities. One, cross-functional teams and fast iterative results, and second, more innovative solutions to solving the problems than the same problem will be solved by three different ways. Find the ones which are feasible and have business logic behind them, rather than just an interesting technology solution.
I can make a comment on talent too. So I think of our we have like an all-in approach. Like we're recruiting data science talent internally. We work with external partners where we know we've got known gaps, like Pecan. And the amazing thing for me, we're one of the things we're good at too is because we're a large organization, we do a lot of like partnerships with universities, and like it's the greatest. It's like free labor. It's awesome. These guys, you got smart kids, and the kids coming out of college right now, all of them know how to code in Python. They all know R. They all know Alteryx. Like they're learning all this stuff now. And they're gonna be ready for the workforce of the future, which is really exciting to me. I'll give you an example. We have a co-op who ran a workshop with our planning team and showed them all how to use Alteryx in an hour. And we had a planner who'd been in a role for 20-something years. She's like, "Oh my God, that used to take me 4 hours to put together. Now it takes 5 minutes." Like just something simple like that. And that's exciting to me that is, but it's, when these co-ops are the great experience for us that we bring them in there, they're getting real world practical business experience that I think is going to balance out their technical experience and make them very valuable contributors when they get into the workforce full time, and hopefully we hire
them. That's excellent. Thanks, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted also to add a note here along the lines of what Tom just said. One of the things that we've been seeing and actually very much supporting of not always, but in some use cases and in some specific situations, the talent gap can also be dealt by bringing in data analysts and data engineers that are not necessarily proficient data scientists yet, because if we agree that the data is a big chunk of the story here, and I think it is, then they are just as, and maybe sometimes even more proficient with dealing with the data. And then in addition, many of the more, let's call it common data science algorithms today had been commoditized, which makes this, it was initially labeled as citizen data scientists motion, and I think today it even goes a bit downstream than that. It helps because there are use cases, there are situations, especially when these are very mission critical and very complicated cases, where you'll have to have these very advanced, very proficient data scientists working on them. But in many other cases, the combination of strong analysts, strong engineers, combined with some tools that help with the data science aspects, can actually capture a very large chunk of the value when the talent is scarce. So that's just a comment I want to make.
I want to add something to that, actually, to what Zohar is saying, and one of the examples there that you're mentioning, and to what Tom was saying about that kind of learning process internally, it's kind of a way to look at it in 3 dimensions when it comes to AI in any organizations. And that's the case with us as well, where we would use AI to improve processes or to help our teams work better. Of course, like in that example that Tom gave us, we obviously would use AI to integrate into our products and to make our products better as well, but also to make AI frameworks such as BCAN and others, and some of these methodologies work better through improving at least the infrastructure capabilities when it comes to the future of compute in general and the various kinds of resources that you'd use. I think those dimensions play an important role, and it's really an interesting example that was brought up there, where you can go from days to hours, or from months to weeks, or from hours to minutes, as Tom mentioned. Yeah.
Niranjan, I saw you wanted to add an additional point. It'd be great to.
No, I'm just saying that this is very true with what what Said brought up. The kind of problems we solve, they also impact the kind of people we bring to them and the kind of solutions we bring to them. So they are getting wider. There are operational problems. I want to read a form with vision algorithms. I want to get my data faster. You could just augment a person, make them more efficient. You're not replacing them, and therefore there is less risk for the organization. So those kind of AI solutions are relatively easy to roll out because you're not really creating a fundamental disruption. Then there are other solutions which are more fundamental in terms of I'm taking a decision on a loan and I want to approve it or not approve it. And suddenly compliance comes in and says, without knowing you've created bias, you're a particular kind of demographic, you're not giving loans. You, as a data scientist, you don't look at that, you look only at data. But then the data resulted in an outcome which was showing bias when somebody has a neutral look at it. So then those kind of decisions have more fundamental questions. And like Tom has, something with health. People might have impacts to their health, and you might then question, is this just an advice, or is it something that fundamental to the way I live, the way I change my lifestyle? And if it didn't work, then am I liable as an organization to, to whatever recommendation I gave? So those become more core to your operations. So that is one dimension against which you say, can I use somebody who's a citizen data scientist, to Zohar's point, somebody who uses out-of-the-box algorithms from various products which are, cloud solutions that are available today? Or should I be more careful about their impact to my organization, to my people, to the people who use it, the stakeholders, both sides? So those are, I think, all questions that are being grappled with by organizations. I'd love to hear Tom's view on that in terms of liability to this, and, are they stopping you from rolling out something, or are you really, kind of treating it as part of this way of doing business?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just asking that as you use AI more and more, do you see more liability kind of questions coming up as well? and confidentiality of data issues kind of risk coming up, or you say that's par for the course?
I don't think it's any more than normal. So, yeah.
Sure.
I could jump in on that, Niranjan, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
I think you've seen probably I would say 15 years ago or so the rise of GRC systems, particularly across large organizations. And Tom, you know that within yours as well as with ours and others. And as that comes up, I mean, are we looking to do that as well with AI systems? Because when we implement AI in any company, I mean, you'll see models that are created, instances of those anyway, that will be created over time. They need to be managed and governed. You need to look at some of the issues that Zohar was talking about, and you need to look at bias, for example. You need to look at the outcomes, the performance of these models, etc. But really, it's also how to the ethics of it in a way, right? Not just the trustworthiness in a sense. How do you bring that up? And the risks comes into the picture, whether it's a risk about the data, and you were talking about data confidence, or some of the confidentiality aspects or privacy, but other elements of it are really, particularly in this day and age, in the last few years, there's a lot of debate around that, and how do we leverage that and also navigate the regulatory environments that are often territorial or global, or in some ways, yeah. I think these are really interesting points to think about them, not only from a data management point of view, but now from an AI management point of view. Isn't that what you're alluding to, Raja? Maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think the other angle for talent that we're targeting is, the more you automate, or the more you systematize what you do, you're able to explain things better, to your point. So if you have a system which records your models and keeps tracks of versions of data in an MLOps kind of framework, or you have a data acquisition, a tool where you're like Altrisk and other products that we have built, which allow you to drag and drop functionalities and get data wrangling them faster. These all have two benefits. One, it accelerates, obviously. Second, it gives you a record of what you did. It shows you exactly what sequences followed. You could reuse it, you could audit it. So a lot of benefits of control that come in because of that process getting automated. So that is where we are going towards solving indirectly the talent problem as well, because you need less time to do it, therefore you need less people, and you can do it to the people you have. So those are some of the angles where we are targeting, the problems.
So you mentioned a good point around the bias and ethics conversation around AI. Tom, I would love to, if you could share what resistance looks like internally. Is there resistance internally to AI? And how do you navigate that? How do you drive alignment? What does that look like from a data perspective?
We're a healthcare company, right? So you're talking about very sensitive right. Data. But I think being a company of our size, though, I think we do have pretty strict data quality, data control policies, and I can tell you, like, we're required at least twice a year to go through training on how to protect and manage data security. It's something we take seriously. Across the organization, not just in supply chain. So it's because we realize too that data is critical for us to drive our business forward, but we also realize the sensitivity of it, the privacy nature. So we're very protective of that, and it's kind of like if you think about like a lot of the it's the argument too, because a lot of these tools that are being developed are open source. But we're also, we want to leverage them, but we need to balance that with what we want to bring into our ecosystem and use. So we're very cautious. I think we take a very cautious approach when it comes to these things, and adapting and using some of these tools. And we try to limit the pool of people that have access and developing to our experts in the space.
Absolutely, Tom. I mean, that particularly in your field and in your sector, like you said, in healthcare, and it's very sensitive, as well as in some of the other ones, where you have that kind of already culture of risk and governance and compliance that's been around. I mean, aspect of transparency.
Believe me, we have it. in space.
I know. Yeah, lineage of data. There's a lot of standardization effort that have been ongoing, working kind of in line with regulatory bodies as well, and I participated in some of those in the past, which kind of helps in tightening that integration, at least as part of a robust strategy. When now you bring it to AI, where it was just data in the past and maybe business processes, right? And maybe Zohar can add to that as well.
Yeah. So my maybe just my 2 cents on that would be that how we've been thinking about it is that eventually most of the AI solutions would have to run on the VPC. So I don't see cases where companies will share their data on the public cloud. I think in the long run that would be problematic for many reasons. But they will all have their own cloud environment, be that with one of the large vendors or something they develop internally. And then solutions will be able to run on the virtual private cloud of each and every company. That will mitigate many of the data sharing challenges that we are seeing for sure. Another nice anecdote is that specifically with predictive analytics, with transactional data, opposed to audio or video, a lot of the data can be completely anonymized. So, and that's also something that a bit lowers the barrier because the machine obviously doesn't care about the phone number or the email address or the name of an individual or anything like that. If there is a necessity to share data externally, rather than doing everything within the private cloud environment, then at least the data should be shared in a complete anonymous way. That really helps.
I think you're right, Zohar. I'll go back also to kind of the point that Tom, you made around open source, right? Which creates, it's kind of interesting in the last few years with all these emerging data platforms, right? NoSQL, Hadoop, and all these things that came up, it helped in some ways, right? On the other hand, it created even more complexity in terms of managing those data, and in my view, kind of created these silos within enterprises, and that kind of helped in some ways in making it less practical. And to your point, Zohar, not everything will be in the public cloud. Things will be kind of integrated in a lot of different environments, from the edge, data centers, or private, multi-cloud in some ways, so that you can actually maximize that value if possible.
Saeed, to build off that point, because I know we spoke a little bit about this, like what is AI in a post-COVID world? The pandemic has, in many ways, been a catalyst, accelerator for tech adoption and new ways to innovate. E-commerce companies will be capturing tons of data about users and customers than ever before. Behaviors are buying patterns are going on. So many transactions are happening online. AI models have played a role in enriching some of those experiences. So you have the platforms, the explosion of the platforms, and then you have the behaviors. So, how do we think about that? Neeraj, I'd love to get your perspective on, AI in a post-COVID world. How do those worlds exist, and what's the opportunity to maybe create more value?
Yeah, I think a wider question around that, is Dan, the experience first design. Ultimately, almost every system, whether it's AI or whether it's non-AI, has to have a user in mind, and then it has to have a use case in mind, and you start from there rather than from technology, rather than from AI, rather than from data, because ultimately, if that user is not satisfied with the use case getting valuable insights, the adoption of that doesn't happen. So, in the context of post-COVID scenarios, the users have changed. Their expectations have changed. Their expectations on privacy has changed. Their availability on the time zones have changed. So when they look at a particular data flow and they say, okay, I can do this with this data, I can create a new kind of solution around, for example, recommendations on healthcare, which come to me on my personal level. The whole experience and expectation has changed after COVID. What was there before and the kind of intrusion which is now almost standard is not for everyone, but majority of people are now more open to providing their information because they feel that it's important for me to be healthy in this scenario where we don't know what's going to happen. So I think that user-centric thinking over a big problem will bring those elements automatically into your solutioning and into your the way you approach that problem. And that is where we have always said that AI first is important, but user first is more important. And together you really have adoption. And that's why we are seeing the most impact to an organization's bottom line or top line.
Saeed, did you want to expand on that, or?
Oh, absolutely. I think you're right, Niranjan. What happened during COVID and now post-COVID is that these models, actually, when you think about whether it's the user, we get to know them better, or at least altering certain behaviors, certain with that move more towards digital transactions. And this is across all sectors, whether you're buying things online or you're dealing with interacting with your doctors or your healthcare providers and other kinds of sectors. And that's interesting from that perspective. I think in terms of there's more data and there's more learnings. In a way, these investments now in accelerating digital transformation and the infrastructure that would support it, there's changes that are happening in terms of the way we would look at not just AI, but really ICT, information and communication technologies in the next 5 years or so. There is that change that's happening to kind of support these type of environment we're in. So this acceleration of digital transformation agendas across the board with AI as one of the core enablers, a core technology in itself, but it's also a use case. I think I agree with Niranjan. The user is at the center of it, and hopefully we get to understand that better. And maybe even the actor. I mean, we're looking at robotics and other smart mobility and other types of environments right now with more autonomy, not just automation. Where a lot of these tools that Zohar has been putting together and others are going to play an important role in getting us there now with this. I think, and this is helping, you and I talked about this, Dan, how it's changing the TAM, and it's definitely a lot of companies are growing, and there's kind of a lot of business as a result of that.
Absolutely. And Zohar, I saw you nodding wholeheartedly. Did you want to, in terms of the total addressable market, how's that affected your world in terms of investments? There's organizations making increased investments in AI, acceleration of digital. Didn't know if you wanted to add on an additional comment.
Sure. So maybe the way I can address this would be in a bit of an amusing anecdote. We are a startup, a VC-backed startup, and we are going through rounds of investment, and each time you need to prepare an investment deck when you tell the story of the company, and so on and so forth. The one slide never had in any of our decks was the slide of the total addressable market. It is so evident, I think, that within the world that we operate, both you have a very large total addressable market today, and also it's very clear that it is going to increase exponentially. So the way we see it, there are very few companies out there eventually that won't be leveraging some type of advanced analytics, AI or ML in their, let's call it midterm or long-term life cycle. It's that obvious for us as a company, and at least for some of the investors. So I think this is probably something that many people intuitively share and understand. And by the way, maybe here a bit, even ironically, it might also be a contributor to the large percentage of initiatives that fail. Because everyone feels it's going to make such a huge impact. Everyone feels it's going to be so enormous in the sense of the value. So that not always the questions that Niranjan, for example, mentioned earlier are being asked at the right time by the right people. And then again, it ends up failing and so on and so forth.
That's excellent. And gentlemen, we have about 10 minutes left, but I want to give the opportunity for you to ask questions. Has there been anything that we haven't addressed that the audience should know, or what do we, what have we not discussed today that we should be thinking about? Maybe Saeed, I'll pick on you again, if that's okay. Is there anything we haven't talked about that's very important?
I think this topic of adoption at scale, right, is important. When we started this, my thing, Dan, it's always when I'm in these panels with distinguished colleagues like this, I always think about what did I learn, and Tom, I think your point earlier that some failures in AI are actually not failures because we're learning, right? We're doing lots of POCs, we're putting teams together. This is kind of a journey in some ways, and I think that's really important, right? Because despite that there are true failures, and probably some companies have setbacks, and maybe they looked at things the wrong way, and they're trying to kind of adjust, or they maybe just gone away from it completely.
I will say, we have a mantra. It's called "If we fail fast."
Exactly. So
if it's not going to work, find out quickly and move on. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's really important because there is, like I was saying, Dan, there is this kind of continuum at the moment that evolution, as it is rapidly increasing in technology adoption, and with COVID, you saw a lot more automation, a lot more digital transformation projects out there, and I think that is helping offer more opportunities to AI-based projects. Yeah, so I think we covered most of it, but I just wanted to say that Tom, thank you. I learned something there from you that I think our audience would appreciate as well. Yeah.
No problem. Happy to help.
And Tom,
for me, I think we covered the ethics, we covered the security, we covered the business need. I think we really covered all the bases. So I think I appreciate being on this panel. I always learn, so especially I love talking.
Excellent.
Zohar and I talk a lot, so I learn a lot.
Well, you're in good company, and I think we greatly appreciate your insights and perspectives that were shared today, and appreciate the time. We're about 8 minutes to the end of the session. We'd love to give audience members the opportunity to ask questions over chat. I'm keeping an eye on chat. I don't know if folks are sleepy or if they've learned enough where they're not posting questions, but always happy to address questions you may have in a follow-up. In fact, there's a poll that we're launching here, and I'm not sure if I have that control. This is my first Bright Talk, so I don't know if that's on my side or if the operator can launch that poll, but we would be interested in continuing the conversation. And there's going to be a poll that's going to be launched with 2 questions. If you just wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to answer that, it'd be greatly appreciated. Both your feedback helps us improve on future sessions, which we plan to host, and also like to know if you'd be interested in continuing the conversation with members on today's call. We'd like to thank the panelists for their time, audience members for your time. We hope the discussion was both interesting and valuable. We hope everyone has a productive rest of the day, and we look forward to speaking again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Pleasure.
And thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
All the
Look
best.
forward to continuing the conversations.
Take care.